The issues that matter, the newsmakers who impact our lives. This is Missouri Viewpoints with Mike Ferguson.
Hello, and thank you for being a part of Missouri Viewpoints. This is the program dedicated to the civil and informed discussion of the political, social, economic, and cultural issues that impact us all. I'm Mike Ferguson, and we are coming to you from Lindenwood University in St. Charles. So how do you feel about your electric bill going up maybe about 6% or so? But what if you're told it's for a good reason and a good cause? That's the debate that Washington has right now that's impacting Missouri. In early June, the Environmental Protection Agency announced a plan to crack down on carbon pollution from coal-based power plants. And that is part of a long-term effort by the Obama administration. But what does it mean to you? It could mean higher utility bills. But is there a bigger picture that makes this necessary? Opponents of the proposal say no, and they worry that the rules won't just increase your bill. They say it will cost Missouri and the rest of the nation jobs. We're going to find out why in about 15 minutes when Ray McCarty from Associated Industries of America joins us. Right now, I'm joined by Andy Knott. He is the Beyond Coal campaign representative for the Sierra Club of Missouri. Andy, welcome to Missouri Viewpoints.
Thank you, Mike.
First, let's kind of just establish, these proposals came out, were announced just a few weeks ago. It's been a long-term process that the EPA has been doing throughout the country. But specifically, what would these proposed rules change?
These rules are historic in that they would, for the first time, dramatically reduce carbon pollution from coal-fired power plants. And here in Missouri, this is just a proposed rule, so it'll be a year before we have a final rule, and another year beyond that before the state of Missouri has rules in place. But as proposed, this rule would reduce carbon pollution from power plants in Missouri by 21%.
Now, one of the things about, as I was, looking over the proposals is, I know that the federal government is saying states will have some flexibility in how they implement it. Washington's not really known for giving states flexibility on things, but what would the state, for instance, be allowed to decide for itself versus what would be mandated from Washington?
Well, the proposed rule does allow quite a bit of flexibility for each state to determine its own path towards making these really critical reductions in pollution. And it could involve increases in energy efficiency programs for customers, which actually reduce electric bills. It could result in efficiencies gained at the power plants themselves, because power plants are not very efficient in terms of converting coal to energy. And so making those power plants more efficient, increasing renewable energy, wind power, solar power, those are also options that are on the table.
If these rules are put into place, and there's obviously a fight legislatively that's already started regarding these rules and the authority to make them, and that's a whole other debate. But if these were to go into place, 30% carbon pollution reductions at the national level, 20% or so in the state, what impact do you believe that would have?
Well, actually, the EPA is estimating that in terms of the cost impacts, that by 2030, because of the energy efficiency programs that would likely be built into most of these rules established around the country, that consumers would actually save about 8% in terms of their electric bills. So there's that estimate from the EPA. Probably the most critical thing, though, is that we will see a reduction in asthma attacks, especially in terms of children and the elderly, because you will see other emissions reduced. You will also see the risk associated with climate change reduced. Anything from warmer days in the summer that increase smog pollution to reduction in severe weather events, tornadoes, flooding. The risks of climate change are real, and we're actually seeing those problems even today.
It's interesting that you say that the utility rates could go down, because even some environmental groups, that are politically tend to be on the left, are estimating that electric prices will go up by about 6%. and that's coming from the Business Forward Foundation, crunching some numbers. The president himself, of course, famously, or infamously, depending how you look at it, said that utility prices will necessarily go up under these rules. So it seems like there's an awful lot of ifs. Do we really know what will happen to our bills?
Well, I think these things will play out over time. I think one thing that is for certain is that in the past, when the EPA has regulated sulfur dioxide or acid rain from power plants, when they've regulated nitrogen oxide, which also causes smog pollution, when they've come up with regulations for those, it's always been a sky is falling sort of prediction that rates are going to go up. It's going to be very expensive, prohibitively expensive to control this pollution. In reality, it turns out it's always been a lot cheaper than people thought it was going to be.
It's estimated that about between 78 and 82% of Missouri's energy comes from coal-powered plants right now.
Correct. It's over 80%.
That is an awful lot of change, even over the course of 10, 15 years, whatever it would be, once something like this was implemented. What would take the place of that energy that's being produced by coal now?
Well, renewables are becoming less and less expensive all the time. In fact, wind power is cost competitive with coal. Kansas City Power and Light, for example, in January announced that they were going to be doubling their wind power purchases. They'll have over 900 megawatts of wind in a year or so, and that's because it's so cost competitive now, and actually in many cases cheaper. So we're going to see an increase in renewables like wind power, solar power, and more investment in energy efficiency.
Long term, does coal have a place in the state's energy portfolio, in your opinion?
Well, I think it depends on how you define long term. Certainly it has a place in the next 15 to 20 years. Beyond that, coal will see a dwindling market share, and we think that's a good thing.
So should coal have a place permanently in our portfolio?
Well, the weird thing about Missouri is that we are 83% coal dependent, but all of our coal comes from out of state. We do not mine coal here in Missouri. We actually export $1.4 billion in terms of our rate dollars going out of state to purchase coal from mostly Wyoming. So the great thing about investing in renewables and energy efficiency is that keeps those dollars here in Missouri. There are currently 2,800 Missourians employed in the solar field, over 70 companies, and that number was projected to increase to 3,900. It's a little bit at risk now because Ameren and KCP&L are cutting back on their rebates for solar. But these are Missouri jobs, and that's one of the great things about this rule is it will spur economic development in clean energy.
And that's where a lot of this debate and a lot of the disagreement comes. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Association of Manufacturers, they're saying that the rules could cost the economy, in their guess, $50 billion a year, but they're also saying because of the increase in prices and the impact on different industries, it could cost around 224,000 jobs, their estimate. I'm not saying that's a fact, I'm just saying that's what they're claiming. When prices do go up, it does impact jobs. What kind of impact on jobs? I mean, you mentioned the increase in about 1,000 solar jobs, but 1,000 jobs across the state just isn't that much.
Well, I mean, when you think about how many people are employed in the coal industry here in Missouri, it's not that much. I mean, again, most of that is being exported, most of those dollars are exported to jobs that are in Wyoming. So, we'll see an increase in homegrown jobs with clean energy. And that estimate of 3,900 next year was before this rule was proposed. So I haven't seen an estimate in terms of what will occur. And just one other thing I should mention, though, is that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said the same thing about acid rain regulations and about nitrogen oxide regulations, that it was going to dramatically increase costs. It just didn't happen.
With the states having some flexibility going back to that under these proposed rules, assuming that they're implemented and that the president and the EPA get the plan that they want, you've got a very conservative legislature here. How do you see that playing out in Jefferson City when it comes to making a plan? Because the fact of the matter is we've got legislators who are have shown a history of just simply defying the federal government on some issues. What do you think that the lawmakers need to know in Jefferson City when it comes to capping carbon emissions?
Well, I think two things. One, a recent Washington Post survey showed that even in more conservative states, in red states, that over 60, almost 70% of Republicans feel that something should be done about climate change and about climate disruption. So there's that aspect. I mean, this is a bipartisan issue in terms of concern about the impacts of climate disruption. Secondly, I think that they need to realize that, again, the economic development potential of clean energy jobs is a huge opportunity for Missouri.
We've just got a few minutes left here. We're visiting with Andy Knott, who is the Beyond Coal campaign representative for the Sierra Club of Missouri. Hopefully I got that right.
Correct, yes.
Tell me about that campaign. What is the goal of that campaign specifically for the state?
Well, the goal here in Missouri is to reduce our dependence on coal. Again, we're 83% dependent on coal. We suffer the consequences. More than 2 million, actually close to 3 million people live in areas of the state, St. Louis, Kansas City, where we have air pollution problems that affect children, asthmatics, and the elderly. And so, we suffer from that. We feel that we need to reduce our dependence and move towards a clean energy economy.
Now, if somebody wants to learn more about that or about what you're doing with the Sierra Club, what's the best way to be in touch?
If you just Google Missouri Beyond Coal, or we have a Facebook page. If you look up Missouri Beyond Coal, you'll find us there.
Now, as we kind of conclude our time here, somebody's watching this or listening on the radio, and they'll say, okay, you've got environmental, political debates, you've got economic debates, which tend to sometimes be a big swirl of numbers and dueling studies. What does this mean for those who are taking in our conversation right now? What is at stake when it comes to these rules and the matter of carbon emissions?
Well, I think it means the United States is finally doing something about carbon pollution. We're taking a lead role now in the world by proposing these rules. I think for Missourians, it means less impact from coal-fired power, less air pollution, and more protection from future climate disruption such as tornadoes and severe weather events.
Okay, Andy Knott from the Sierra Club of Missouri. Thank you so much for the time and the insight today.
Great.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mike.
Can we have a safer environment without the federal rules and possible increase to our cost of living that they claim will come with it? Ray McCarty from Associated Industries of Missouri has a different viewpoint on the matter.
Can you help me with this? My new dad teaches me all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
He helps me with homework.
That would be 3.6795.
Thanks.
Yep.
He helps me with my decision making.
I wouldn't use this one. Ever.
And he's even teaching me how to drive.
And that's why cars have bumpers.
I'm learning so much.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Time to wake up.
I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Don't forget, you've got a job to do today.
Hey, Mom. I got the job. Thanks.
Got the job. Welcome aboard.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does.
And like that, you're a job creator.
What do you think it would be like to teach? Chances are, you have no idea. Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places. and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable. That's what it's like to teach.
You know, the windshield just glass broke and screeching, and I saw, you know, a body come down from off the top of the van, and I just thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I done? There's never a day that I wake up that I don't think about it.
Thank you for staying with us on Missouri Viewpoints. I'm Mike Ferguson, and we are coming to you from Lindenwood University in St. Charles. Well, there is no shortage of disagreement when it comes to environmental and climate issues, but could that lead to a shortage of wattage for your home, or maybe an increase in what you pay for that power? Ray McCarty is the president of Associated Industries of Missouri. Ray, welcome back to Missouri Viewpoints.
Thanks very much, Mike. It's good to be back.
It's interesting when we talk about anything that has to do with environmental policy, energy policy, the two different sides that are inevitably on the divide sound like they're talking about two completely different issues sometimes.
Yes, and it really all goes back to the core philosophies around global warming, and some people believe global warming is real, others don't. But even accepting that global warming is real, then what to do about it, and the policies that we make in the United States, how do those really affect global warming overall? And then you get past that policy discussion and to the point, okay, if you do policies in the United States, then what should those policies be, and how aggressive should those policies be?
Well, how aggressive do you find the proposed policies that came out a little bit or in early June from the EPA, from the Obama administration on carbon emissions? I think everybody agrees carbon pollution is a bad thing, just like sulfur pollution or mercury pollution. I think we all agree with that, but it's a reality of doing business in some ways. But how aggressive do you find those proposed rules?
We think they're very aggressive, and in fact, the problem that we see with those regulations is that we've taken great steps in the United States to reduce carbon emissions already. The coal that we're burning now to get 82% of our power in Missouri to generate electricity is much cleaner now than it used to be. And we've taken a lot of steps to reduce emissions in the transmission of electricity and the generation of electricity. So we've already taken great steps in that regard. What's disturbing about this is that it's basically outlawing the use of coal, and it's doing that through reducing the emissions to a point that's unreasonable. What that means for the consumers is that they're not going to be able, that our power companies are not going to be able to use coal, which is the cheapest form of generation of electricity. They're going to have to move on to natural gas, and eventually natural gas is not going to fit the bill either. And so really what it's done, and we could talk about this for hours, is it's pushing us toward a very unpopular idea that was rejected by Congress and rejected and eventually abandoned by the Obama administration, and that's a cap and trade system.
One of the areas that proponents of these rules say it's going to force us to use renewable energy sources, solar and wind, and they argue wind in particular, hey, is just as cheap as coal, they say. So I don't know that anybody disagrees with using more renewable energy, but what would be the problem with forcing more renewable energy into the portfolio and trying to get away from coal and fossil fuels?
Well, I can tell you, as the technology improves, of course, there's a move toward trying to use more renewable energy, and that's happening on its own. As the technology improves, we're using more solar, we're using more wind. The problem is reliability. The wind doesn't always blow when you need electricity generated, and electricity can only be stored for so long. Same with solar. The sun only shines, through certain parts of the day. So you don't have the reliability with renewable energy, and of course, all of that technology right now is very expensive. And so as you move toward renewable energy, you also have to admit that you're going to increase costs. And as you increase costs, then those costs are not borne by the utility companies. They are in the business of continuing to make money so they can continue to provide power, which means all the consumers are going to pay the bill, which means businesses, which are my constituents in Associated Industries of Missouri, we consume a lot of electricity, but so do all of our individual citizens out there.
one of the areas of contention is the economic impact of this. Of course, we just had Andy Knott on from the Sierra Club. He says, well, this is going to create jobs because it's going to basically spur on the renewable energy industry, and that may very well be. The National Association of Manufacturers, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, saying nationally this could cost up to 224,000 jobs. How does a change in energy policy result in the loss of jobs?
Well, it results in the loss of jobs because you're increasing costs and people are no longer, there's only so many dollars in the system, and as you start to use more dollars to purchase power, those are fewer dollars that you can use for personnel. So that's how it results in the loss of jobs. If you get away from even the jobs argument, though, just the pure increase in costs, we know it's going to increase costs. The EPA has admitted it's going to increase costs. The question is how much. No one really knows for sure. The EPA will have cost estimates out there that will tell you how much they think it's going to increase costs, and I'm sure that will be a more modest figure than will be generated by other groups that are opposed to it. Somewhere in between is probably the real number. We saw with some earlier regulations, the EPA estimated that costs would increase by 6% by their regulations and the utility MACT regulations. These are probably going to be higher than that. In Missouri, because we get such a large percentage of our electricity, 82% from coal, it's very likely that the percentage cost that's going to be borne by our citizens is much higher. And so we're looking at a pretty significant increase in utility bills that people are already having difficulty paying, and is already a significant cost for our businesses.
One of the arguments made a little bit earlier and is being made is that, well, it's going to save money in other areas, because if there's less pollution, there's less problems with everything from medicine to from asthma attacks and other types of health issues. So we're going to save money in other areas if we clean up a lot of the pollution going into the air. Is there a validity in that connection?
I think we've already got the big gains in that regard, because we've already cleaned up a lot of the emissions. We're not starting from zero here. In fact, in Missouri, the new regulations are going to impose a 21% reduction in Missouri, where some other places they're going for 30% or greater, because we already have taken great steps in reducing our emissions in Missouri. So I think we've already taken the low-hanging fruit there. We've already gone a long way down the road toward protecting our citizens in terms of health. So I don't think there are big gains to be had there. The other thing that you have to realize is that while we're working so hard to control our emissions here, and we're doing a good job with our existing regulations, look at China. Look at India, look at other places that are continuing to just pour carbon into the atmosphere. We're all breathing the same air. It's not, we don't have a little dome over the United States where we breathe the air that we generate here. It's shared air through the globe. And I'd like to know how this is going to help China reduce their emissions. If they're saying that we should set the example for China, we're already doing that. China's not following. So obviously setting the example is not working.
Let's talk about that economic impact a little bit more. We're visiting with Ray McCarty, the president of Associated Industries of Missouri. The EPA, you said, is estimating 6%. Let's even assume that it's more, it's 8 or 10%. I know a lot of people, other than the peak times where you're running your air conditioner, your bill can be in the state $70, $80, $100. So we could be talking about maybe an extra $10 a month. A lot of people would argue that's not a very big increase, and hey, if it reduces pollution, why worry about that extra $10 bill for the average consumer in the state? How does this impact them outside of that?
Well, it's easy for people who can afford their bills to say that an extra amount is not a big amount. For those people who are having trouble affording it already, I think it's probably a much more serious discussion. For our businesses out there that are purchasing, where they're spending $1 million a year on electricity, a 10% increase is $100,000. That's a couple of jobs. That's a couple of people they could employ otherwise. $100,000 they could use for capital improvements. It's another $100,000 in the increased price they have to charge for goods. Makes us less competitive. I just think it's something that, we're already making great strides voluntarily and through existing regulations. There's really no need to go further as we appear to be going down this road. And we have to be very careful, because we're working our way down this road into an impossible situation. If we take away coal, And we have to look at these regulations further because this is a slow burn. It's a year to finalize the EPA rule, another year to come up with the state implementation plan. So we have 2 years now to work on this. But we're looking a little closer to see. It looks like natural gas is the favored mode of generation now. But will natural gas even meet the regulations 7, 8 years down the road? If that's not the case, then you can't build a new power plant that's going to use natural gas because you won't be able to recover the costs of that by the time natural gas no longer does the trick. And I think we're really looking at this seriously because we're concerned you're going to be forced into simply a cap and trade system.
Well, anytime that there's a effort to build a new power plant, there's a tremendous amount of controversy on a variety of different levels. I mean, one of the reasons that there are problems now is because our power plants are getting old in the state. You know, if coal is being pushed out, we're obviously not going to build new coal power plants.
Right.
What's the long-term impact of that? There's controversies over nuclear, you know, whether it's in Callaway County, which provides power to a tremendous part of the state. There's a pushback against the fracking technique to develop new sources of natural gas. So if you're looking 10, 20, 30 years down the road, what's the impact?
That is, and what's the answer? You know, what's the answer that the environmentalists will consider as a good answer? And that's been our question all along. You know, they don't like coal, they don't like natural gas because of fracking, they don't like nuclear. You know, if it's got to be wind and solar, those are unreliable technologies. They aren't going to be reliable as a primary source of electricity. And so we just don't know how practically this is going to play out.
At least right now. Who knows what the technology is going to look like in 10 years. You mentioned cap and trade a couple times in the few minutes we've got left. Explain what that is and why do you feel that would be a bad thing?
Well, it's weird because, you know, for people who don't understand what cap and trade is, it's basically purchasing renewable energy credits. And what that means is there's electricity being generated by solar or wind technology someplace, and then you purchase the fact that that is being generated someplace and you're able to use that to offset a renewable energy standard in Missouri. It's just a weird way of monopoly money moving around on a board to say that you're overall you're moving renewable energy into the system overall. It's a cap and trade system. Really what it does, it just puts more money into the system. It makes your electricity more expensive. And that's why it's been rejected by Congress. It was even abandoned by the Obama administration as something they couldn't get politically. And now they're just doing it through regulation.
Somebody wants to learn more on what the Associated Industries of Missouri, National Association of Manufacturers. What are some of the best resources to learn more about this or to be in touch if they've got questions from your perspective? Because I think a lot of people are confused about this because both sides are saying such dramatically different things about the scenario and about the impacts.
And I will make a commitment. You know, we're trying to filter through the nonsense and get down to the real stuff. We're trying not to politicize the issue. We're trying to get down to real facts and figures. They can go to we have a blog, the latest news tab on our website at aimo.com. We will try to keep up to date with all the news stories out there. They can also go to the National Association of Manufacturers website, nam.org, and they will have stories as this continues to roll out over the next 2 years.
All right, Ray McCarty from Associated Industries of Missouri, always good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it. And on behalf of Lindenwood University Television, thank you for being a part of Missouri Viewpoints. I'm Mike Ferguson, and we'll talk to you again next week.